Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Betrayed Man's Diary for more stories. Today should have been our 10-year wedding anniversary. 10 years. It's such a loaded milestone, isn't it? A full decade of marriage, something that should feel like an achievement, a celebration. And yet, here I am at 32, sitting alone in the quiet of my apartment, thinking about the life that fell apart slowly enough that I didn't realize we were sinking until we'd already hit the bottom. My ex-wife, Emily, she's 31 now, was my first love. Honestly, she was kind of my only real love, if I'm being truthful. We met in middle school, in the 7th grade, during a group project about the American Revolution. I barely said 2 words to anyone back then, always had my head buried in a book or behind a screen. Emily was the opposite, loud, energetic, smart in this bold, fearless way. She wasn't the best student, but she had this energy that made you want to listen to her. By high school, we were officially a thing. Prom dates, yearbook pages signed with hearts and "forever" scribbled between inside jokes and memories. She was my person before I even understood what that meant. We stayed together all through college, and shortly after graduating, we got married in a small ceremony at her aunt's farmhouse. We didn't have much, just each other and a ton of hope for the future. We ended up having 3 kids together. 2 boys and a girl. Parenthood hit us fast and hard. Suddenly, we were waking up for 3 a.m. feedings, learning to swaddle, arguing about formula versus breastfeeding, and trying to find the line between exhaustion and resentment. But even in the chaos, there was this warmth, like we were building something meaningful from the ground up. For the first few years of our marriage, Emily stayed home with the kids. It wasn't always the plan, but it made the most sense financially at the time. I was working long hours at a mid-level tech company, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave us insurance, which, as any parent knows, becomes your holy grail once the kids arrive. Emily, for her part, threw herself into being a full-time mom. She was incredible at it, too. Arts and crafts, healthy lunches, sleep schedules, she mastered all of it. But over time, I started noticing a shift in her. She was still loving, still attentive, but there was a look in her eyes that started to linger, something distant, like she was slowly becoming a ghost inside our house. Like she wasn't sure if she still recognized herself in the mirror. After a few years of staying home, she told me she wanted to go back to school. She'd left her degree incomplete when she got pregnant with our first, and now that all 3 kids were in elementary school, she said she finally had time to finish what she started. I supported it completely. We adjusted our schedules, cut a few corners financially, and made it work. I was proud of her. She dove back into college life like she was chasing something that had been waiting for her all along. She picked up right where she left off, joined study groups, talked constantly about her courses and professors. She was animated again, lit up in ways I hadn't seen in years. Then, with just 1 semester left before graduation, she dropped out. Said she realized the major she'd been pursuing, psychology, didn't excite her anymore. That she couldn't imagine working in that field long term. It was a shock, not just because of the timing, but because of how quickly she seemed to let go of everything she'd worked so hard to rebuild. Instead, she told me she was going to start working at a local restaurant downtown. Sloan's Bistro, a semi-upscale place with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails where her best friend Rachel, 38, a divorced single mom with a loud laugh and a permanent wine buzz, worked as a waitress. Rachel had been in Emily's life since their early 20s. I never had anything against her personally, but she always struck me as the type who wasn't interested in marriage or stability. She thrived in chaos. And Emily? She was starting to crave something outside the safety we'd built. She said waitressing was temporary, just a way to make some cash while she figured out her next steps. I believed her. I wanted to. I told myself it was a phase. That she'd find her footing again. But something about her changed after she started working at that place. After Emily started working at Sloan's, it was like someone flipped a switch inside her. She laughed more. Moved more. Woke up without sighing like the day was already too much. She came home from shifts buzzing with stories, the quirky regulars, kitchen drama, new appetizers they were trying. For the first time in what felt like years, she had things to talk about that weren't tied to diaper brands, pediatrician appointments, or whether we were out of almond milk. And honestly, it made me happy. After everything she'd been through, years of putting herself last, of drowning slowly in the monotony of stay-at-home parenthood and the brutal fog of depression, it was good to see her light up again. She was laughing with her coworkers, texting Rachel during the day, even doing her makeup again. For a while, it felt like things were finally turning a corner. At least, that's what I told myself. I work full-time, and always have. I'm in a stable IT role at a mid-sized logistics firm. It's not glamorous, lots of spreadsheets, meetings that could be emails, troubleshooting issues that repeat themselves weekly, but it pays well and comes with good benefits. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we were stable. Still, once Emily's job started shifting her schedule more toward the evenings and weekends, the good, serving shifts, with better tips and more traffic, I started adjusting my own life to keep our house running. It wasn't a conversation we sat down and had, really. It just evolved. She needed to work those hours to bring in money. So I made it work. I talked to my boss about modifying my schedule. I picked up the kids from school. Started doing drop-offs too when needed. I rearranged meetings so I could be home on their teacher workdays and early dismissals. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, I took all 3 kids to soccer and gymnastics. I packed snacks, brought their gear, kept track of water bottles and shin guards, stood on the sidelines clapping while balancing a laptop on my knee to finish work in the car. I made dinner most nights, too, learned how to make baked ziti without burning it, figured out how to make quesadillas that didn't fall apart when you flipped them. Laundry? Me. Grocery runs? Me. Cleaning bathrooms and organizing closets on weekends? Me. I didn't mind. Not really. At least not in the beginning. Because this was what marriage was supposed to be, right? Give and take. Sacrifice. Picking up slack when the other person's load is too heavy. Emily had been through some dark years, darker than most people knew. There was the postpartum depression after our second child that no one really acknowledged at the time. Then, the quiet decline after our third was born. There were days she didn't get out of bed. Days where she'd cry quietly in the shower so the kids wouldn't hear. She hid it well from the world. But not from me. The lowest point came 2 years before Sloane's, when I found her in the garage one evening, sitting in the car with the engine running and the door closed. She told me later it wasn't a real attempt. That she just wanted the noise to stop. That she didn't actually want to die, she just didn't know how to keep living the way she was. After that night, we got her into therapy. Medication. Weekly appointments. Check-ins. I kept the kids out of the room when she needed space. Took over bedtime routines when she couldn't find the strength to brush her own hair, let alone theirs. So yeah, when she said the restaurant job made her feel alive again, I was relieved. If that meant I had to juggle more, so be it. I wasn't just her husband, I was her partner. And a partner carries weight when the other can't. What I didn't realize, what I didn't want to realize, was that I wasn't just holding up my half. I was carrying both of us. While she started drifting. Not obviously. Not dramatically. Just slowly. Like she was slipping behind a curtain I couldn't reach through. She still smiled at me. Still said she loved me. Still played with the kids and posted happy photos of us on Instagram. But her eyes, they weren't always there when I spoke. She didn't ask how work was anymore. Didn't want to cuddle at night, said she was too tired or too sore from walking all shift. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Stress. Physical burnout. And maybe some of that was true. But a part of me, a quiet, uninvited part, had already started whispering what I refused to hear. You're not the reason she's smiling when she walks in the door anymore. Still, I doubled down. Made things easier for her. Gave her space. Booked a weekend trip for us for our anniversary. She said she couldn't get the time off, but thanked me with a tight hug and a promise of, maybe later. I told myself we were just in a phase. Marriage has seasons, right? Some are warm and connected. Others are cold and quiet. I just had to wait for the thaw. So I waited. And waited. While Emily got brighter in a world I wasn't invited into. If you've ever watched someone drift from you in slow motion, you know the kind of anxiety that doesn't scream, it whispers. Constantly. Quietly. Until everything feels suspicious, even the good moments. About 3 or 4 months into Emily's job at Sloan's, she started mentioning a new name in her stories. Jake. Jake was a 24-year-old line cook at the restaurant. One of those young, energetic guys with too many tattoos, a collection of vintage band shirts, and a habit of turning every story into a joke. She talked about him the way someone might talk about a funny sitcom character, harmless, ridiculous, always stirring up drama in the kitchen. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, restaurants are chaotic. You spend long shifts in tight spaces, get to know your coworkers fast. They form this weird little ecosystem, a world that lives completely separate from the lives people return to after closing time. Emily would come home and tell me stories, how Jake had accidentally dropped a tray of drinks during a packed Friday night rush, or how he kept butchering the same 2 Spanish phrases when talking to the dishwasher who'd been helping him for weeks. How he flirted with all the waitresses, got caught singing off-key during prep, how he teased Rachel about her date from Tinder being 5 inches shorter than his profile claimed. It all sounded innocent. Until it didn't. At some point, I can't say exactly when, the tone changed. It went from, "Jake's such a goofball," to, "Jake told me I looked too good to be a mom of 3. The first time she said it, she was laughing, like it was a compliment she didn't take seriously. But it stuck with me. Especially because it came up again. And again. Little things. Jake said my hair looked amazing tonight. Jake keeps joking that I must have been a cheerleader in high school. Jake's always asking if I've got a secret twin sister because I can't possibly be married. She always framed it like harmless banter. Said Jake was, just like that, flirty with everyone, a walking HR violation nobody really took seriously. But I did. Because I wasn't just hearing his words. I was watching her reaction to them. She lit up when she talked about him. Laughed differently. Told the stories with this little twinkle in her eye, like there was an inside joke I wasn't part of. At first, I tried to ignore it. Told myself I was being insecure. That after years of dealing with Emily's depression, I should be thrilled she was finding happiness again. But something about Jake bothered me. It wasn't just that he was younger. It was the way she told me about his comments, like she was testing how I'd react. So one night, after the kids were asleep, I brought it up. Gently. "Hey. I know Jake's funny and all, but do you think he might be crossing a line?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then said. "It just seems like he flirts with you. A lot. And it makes me uncomfortable." She didn't get defensive, not right away. She just kind of shrugged. "He's harmless. That's just how he is." I nodded, but added. "Still, you're married. Maybe it's worth setting a firmer boundary." That's when her expression changed. Subtle. Cold. "I'm not doing anything wrong. He's the one making the comments. I don't encourage it." I said I understood. That I wasn't accusing her, just asking for some awareness. She nodded. Promised she'd make it clear she wasn't interested. And for a while, it seemed like she had. Jake's name stopped coming up in conversation. She talked more about other coworkers, a new manager, a rude hostess, a regular customer who tipped in loose change. Her stories felt more neutral again. More safe. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thought maybe I'd overreacted. That maybe I was being paranoid, and she'd taken my concerns seriously. Looking back now, I see it differently. Jake didn't vanish from her life. She just stopped telling me about him. And I took her silence as reassurance. Not realizing it was actually concealment. But at the time, I believed her. Because I wanted to. Because believing her meant I could still hold on to the image of our marriage as something real. Stable. Worth the sacrifices I was making every day just to keep it all together. She said he wasn't flirting anymore. Said she didn't talk to him unless it was work-related. And I told myself, that's good enough. I didn't know I'd already started losing her. And worse? That she'd already started giving herself to someone else. One casual laugh, one text, one late-night ride home at a time. It's hard to explain exactly when a marriage dies. It's rarely sudden, no sharp break or clean ending. More often, it's a slow decay. A kind of erosion. At first, you stop holding hands while watching TV. Then, you stop saying good morning when one of you wakes up earlier. You stop texting during the day just to say hi. You stop noticing when the silence stretches too long between you. That was us. Over the course of that year, our relationship quietly faded into something cold and distant. The kind of thing you don't talk about out loud because admitting it would make it too real. It wasn't one fight. It was no fights. No passion. Just routine. Disconnection. A polite sort of sadness. Emily and I no longer made time to date each other. That sounds like such a cliché, I know. But it's a cliché for a reason. Date nights used to be our thing. Cheap takeout and a Netflix movie after the kids were asleep. Occasionally, a babysitter and dinner out, nothing fancy, but enough to remind each other we were more than just co-managers of the same household. But as her job at Sloan's took over more of her evenings, and as I shouldered more of the parenting load, we stopped making the effort. We were like two people living in the same house but in different dimensions. She came home late. I went to bed early. We passed each other like shadows in a hallway. And I let it happen. Because part of me still believed that this was just a phase. That once she found her rhythm, once the new job excitement wore off, we'd find our way back to each other. I didn't know she was cheating on me. Not officially. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That gut feeling had taken root and refused to let go. Every time she walked through the door and smiled too hard at her phone, every time she laughed at a message and then quickly tucked it away, every night she came home smelling like someone else's cologne, not her own perfume or kitchen grease. I didn't have proof. But I didn't need it. I could feel the distance like a bruise I kept bumping into. Then came March. The night she didn't come home. It wasn't the first time she'd gone out after work. Over the past few months, it had become normal for her to grab drinks with coworkers after their shifts ended, especially on weekends. And for a long time, I was genuinely happy for her. It seemed like she was finally building friendships, real ones, not just casual mom group acquaintances or Rachel's wine-fueled gossip. These were her peers. People who saw her as something more than just a wife or just a mom. She needed that. I saw that. And I respected it. So when she texted around 11:30 that night to say she was staying out a little longer, I didn't question it. Just responded. Be safe. Don't drink too much. I put the phone down. Went to bed. Woke up around 3 a.m. and reached for her side of the bed. Still empty. No text. No call. My chest tightened. I tried not to panic. Told myself maybe her phone had died. Maybe someone needed a ride home. Maybe she crashed on Rachel's couch after one too many tequila shots. I waited until 4:30 before texting again. Are you okay? Just let me know you're safe. No reply. By 6 a.m., the sun was up, and I was pacing. I called. Straight to voicemail. That's when panic turned into dread. She walked through the front door around 7:15 a.m., wearing the same clothes from the night before. Makeup slightly smudged. Hair tied up in a way she never wore it, pulled hastily into a bun like someone had just untangled it. She didn't look surprised to see me waiting. Just, exhausted. Sorry, she mumbled. I fell asleep at Rachel's. Didn't mean to worry you. I looked at her for a long time. Not angry. Not yelling. Just trying to decide whether I believed her. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. She wasn't sleeping at Rachel's. She just didn't want to sleep here. I asked, "You didn't see your phone all night?" She shook her head. It must have died. I was just too tired to notice. I nodded. Didn't push it. What was the point? When someone has already decided they're willing to lie to your face, asking for honesty is just giving them another chance to rehearse. That day, I took the kids to school. Made coffee. Cleaned the kitchen. Mowed the lawn. Did all the normal things that made me look like a man still living in a marriage. But something inside me had shifted. The trust one was clinging to. It snapped. Quietly. No noise. No fight. Just the sound of something falling apart that had been breaking for months. Some lies fall apart all on their own. All it takes is one overlooked detail. One small inconsistency. One person who was there, and remembers. The morning after Emily didn't come home from work, she told me she'd crashed at Rachel's house. Rachel, her longtime best friend, coworker, and, lately, her default explanation for every late night, every unexplained absence, every silence I didn't question out loud. She said she'd been out with coworkers for drinks, and things ran late. Her phone died. She didn't want to drive home that tired. Rachel offered her couch. I wanted to believe her. Hell, I almost did. But here's the thing. I saw Rachel that night. Our daughters, mine and Rachel's, were in the same dance class. Same studio, same day, same class. It had become routine over the last year. We'd meet at the Thursday evening class, sit on the uncomfortable plastic chairs near the back, watch through the glass as our girls practiced twirls, leaps, and the occasional clumsy cartwheel. That night was no different. Rachel and I sat next to each other like we always did. We chatted a bit, about school, about costumes for the upcoming recital, about a teacher who'd assigned a group project without warning. She was her usual self, sarcastic, distracted, half listening to her daughter and half texting someone on her phone. Nothing unusual. No sign that she was about to host Emily for a late-night sleepover. And certainly no sign that she had plans to hit the bars. After dance, Rachel left with her daughter to head straight home. She told me as much. I've got emails piling up and a kid who still needs to shower before bed. Gonna be a long night. I waved her off and said, good luck. She laughed, rolled her eyes, and drove away. I didn't think much of it, before Emily used her as an alibi. That's when the pieces started to come together, or rather, fall apart. Because I remembered, clearly, where Rachel was. I was there. I sat next to her at dance. We left at the same time. She was heading home with her daughter, who couldn't be alone. So where, exactly, did Emily go that night? Because it sure as hell wasn't Rachel's. I didn't confront Emily immediately. Not because I was afraid of the truth, I already knew it. But because I wanted to see what she'd do next. How far she was willing to take it. Would she double down? Would she spin a new version of the lie? Or would she finally admit what I already felt deep in my bones, that the woman I married had become someone who could lie to me without even flinching? A few days later, I called Rachel. I played it cool. Just asked if she could help out with the girls the next week, maybe do the pickup if my meeting ran late. She said sure, and then asked how I was doing. Emily told me things have been tense lately. That was her phrasing. Tense. Like our marriage was just a little tight around the seams, not unraveling by the hour. I paused. Yeah. Thursday was rough. Her voice softened. Yeah, that was a long night for her, huh? I played dumb. How so? Rachel hesitated. Then said the sentence that set the whole thing on fire. Wait, she told you she was at my house that night? Silence. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She gasped. Oh no. Oh my God. I'm sorry, I wasn't with her. The rest of the conversation was a blur. She was apologetic. Embarrassed. Said she hadn't seen Emily in person in over a week. That they'd talked, yes, but nothing about that night, nothing about plans, drinks, sleepovers, nothing. Rachel had been home with her daughter after dance. She was certain of it. So now, I was too. Emily had lied. Not just about the night. But about everything. She had used her best friend, the one person I might not question, as a prop in her performance. Because she assumed I wasn't paying attention. Because she figured I'd never ask. And the worst part? She was right, I hadn't asked. Not until it was too late. Not until the web of lies was tangled so tightly around me that I couldn't tell which memories were real and which were staged. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in anger. Not even in grief. Just, clarity. Because if she could lie to me that easily, and still come home and kiss our kids goodnight, and still crawl into my bed and pretend to be mine, then she had already left the marriage. She just hadn't packed her bags yet. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your thoughts get loud. I had already decided I would confront Emily the next morning, calmly, directly. I didn't want a fight. I didn't want drama. I just wanted the truth. Or at least, whatever version of the truth she would be willing to give me. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind wouldn't rest. I was lying there in bed, wide awake, when it hit me. The app. We had originally set it up for our daughter, a basic parental control tool so we could see where she was and make sure she was safe. But it tracked both of our phones, not just hers. It had become second nature to us, one of those invisible background things you forget about until it suddenly matters. I grabbed my phone and opened it, not expecting anything. Just, checking. And then I saw it. There was my location, at home. And then there was Emily's. But she wasn't at work. She wasn't anywhere near the restaurant. Her location pinged from an apartment building about 10 miles across town. And I knew that building. Because months ago, driving past it, she had pointed to it from the passenger seat. That's where Jake lives. Tiny place. Crappy parking. Jake. The 24-year-old line cook who flirted with her endlessly. The one who told her she looked too good to be a mom of 3. The one who kept pushing, even after I asked her to shut it down. The one she told me she barely spoke to anymore. Her dot hadn't moved in over an hour. She was there. With him. I stared at the screen like it might blink away if I kept looking. It didn't. She was still there at 1 a.m. Still there at 2 a.m. Still there when the street outside our house turned from night to dawn. My phone sat beside me the entire time, glowing faintly. Every time I refreshed the screen, the location stayed the same. There was no more wondering. No more waiting for a sign. The sign had arrived, in the form of cold digital truth. Emily had made her choice. And she didn't even bother to hide it properly. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. I sat on the couch with a blanket over my lap, watching the door, drinking cold coffee from a cup I'd poured at midnight. My mind wasn't racing anymore. It had already crossed the finish line. I knew where she was. I knew who she was with. And I knew exactly what that meant. At 6:13 a.m., the app finally updated. She was on the move. I heard the car pull up 10 minutes later. The key in the door. The soft creak as it opened. She stepped inside like she didn't know I'd been waiting all night. Still wearing the same clothes. Her makeup was slightly smudged. Her hair tied back in a way she never wore it when she was at home. I didn't speak. Not yet. I just looked at her, really looked. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw a stranger. When she finally walked through the door, I was already seated on the couch, hands folded, phone turned face down beside me. I had been there for hours. Waiting. She looked surprised to see me awake. Not shocked. Just mildly annoyed, like she'd been hoping to slip in unnoticed and deal with whatever came later, maybe over coffee and forced conversation. But I wasn't going to give her that luxury. She dropped her keys on the counter. Kicked off her shoes. Avoided eye contact. I watched her go through the motions and let her have a moment of quiet, just enough to give her space to lie one last time. Then I asked, without raising my voice. "Where were you last night?" Her eyes flicked up, just for a second. Then she launched into it. "I went out for drinks with Rachel and a couple coworkers after my shift. I had too much, Anne. I didn't feel safe driving home. So I stayed at Rachel's." Same story. Same flat tone. Same rehearsed cadence she'd used before. It almost would have worked, if I hadn't already spoken to Rachel. But I had. And I wasn't in the mood to play dumb. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I saw Rachel at dance last night. I know she had her daughter with her. I know she went straight home." Her face didn't shift right away. But then, the pause. That tiny pause, half a second too long. That's when the story changed. "Okay, not Rachel's. I meant Natalie's. I stayed at Natalie's place. You know, she lives close to the restaurant, Anne." I cut her off. "Natalie lives in a single-family home." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to calculate how much I knew, how much she could still get away with. I leaned forward. My voice didn't shake. "Your location showed you at an apartment complex." She froze. Just stood there in the entryway, arms crossed like she needed a physical barrier between us. Silence stretched out between us, thick, heavy, oppressive. And then I asked the question I'd been holding in my chest for weeks. "Are you having an affair with Jake?" Her lips parted. Just barely. No denial. No outrage. No manufactured offense. Just that flicker of breath, that moment she realized there was nothing left to spin. And then, finally, she nodded. Just once. A tiny movement. Almost imperceptible. But enough to blow our entire life apart. The world didn't stop. The house didn't shake. The kids didn't wake up screaming. But something inside me, something deep, shattered. Not loudly. More like a crack beneath the surface that finally reached the edge. Because there it was. The truth. Unmistakable. Undeniable. And spoken not with words, but a nod. Like that was all the explanation she thought I needed. I leaned back slowly and let it settle over me. The silence after betrayal is strange. You expect rage. You expect sobbing. You expect the dramatic collapse of everything you built. But sometimes it's just numbness. A hollow quiet that spreads until even your heartbeat sounds distant. She didn't say anything else. She didn't offer reasons. Didn't apologize. She just stood there, arms crossed, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Maybe she thought her nod was enough. Maybe she didn't know what else to say. Or maybe, deep down, she believed I'd known all along. And maybe I had. But hearing it changes everything. The days after her confession were a blur. There was no screaming match. No thrown plates. No tearful begging. Just silence. We passed each other in the hallway like strangers. Slept on opposite edges of the same bed, barely breathing the same air. And yet, for all the pain, there was still one question lingering over everything like a storm cloud: could we fix this? Could a decade of marriage, 3 children, a shared history, the inside jokes we used to laugh at in grocery store aisles, survive an affair? We decided to try. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe out of fear. Maybe because neither of us could imagine explaining to the kids why mom and dad suddenly lived in different houses. We started with therapy. Couples counseling, twice a week. And I added individual sessions for myself, because I needed someone to talk to who didn't look at me like they already had the ending figured out. Emily was receptive, at least at first. She nodded in all the right places, said the right things, repeated the therapist's suggestions like she believed in them. But I could tell, even early on, that something was off. She was still somewhere else. Like she was going through the motions, but her mind kept drifting back to a place I wasn't allowed to go. And then she told me. She had broken up with Jake. They met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground. Public enough to avoid drama. She said she didn't know how he'd react, whether he'd plead or rage or shrug it off. But he didn't do much of anything. Just sat there as she explained that she was choosing her family. That she had to try to make things work with her husband. That it was over. I don't know how true all of that was. I wasn't there. I only know what she told me, and by then, I wasn't sure how much of what she told me was real. But she came home that night in tears. Not over me. Not over us. But over him. And I, idiotically, heartbreakingly, held her. I sat on the edge of our bed while she cried over the end of her relationship with the man who helped destroy our marriage, and I whispered that she'd be okay. I wanted to scream. But instead, I consoled the woman who had burned me down to ash. Because I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I showed her what real love looked like, she'd remember what we had. In the weeks that followed, we made an effort. We went on dates. Dinner. A walk by the river. A movie neither of us enjoyed but pretended to for the sake of comfort. But it felt like trying to wade back into a river that had already dried up. Each date was painfully awkward. Like meeting someone for the first time, someone who happened to have your children's eyes, your home scent, your past in fragments behind their smile. We ran out of things to talk about within minutes. I'd ask about work. She'd ask about the kids. We avoided the real questions, the ones that would have exposed how far we'd already drifted. And the highs? They were microscopic. A shared laugh here. A soft touch on the arm there. But the lows? They loomed. Long stretches of silence. Short fuses over nothing. Mistrust woven into every word. I didn't love her anymore. That was the truth. I said I did, to her, to our therapist, to myself. But it wasn't real. What I felt was obligation. Fear of the unknown. And a deep, aching sadness that the person I once chose above all others had chosen someone else. Even if just for a while. But I stayed. For the kids. Because splitting time with them, giving up bedtime stories and Saturday pancakes and being the first face they saw when they woke up, felt like losing everything. So I endured. I played house with a woman I no longer trusted. I smiled through clenched teeth. I waited for the version of our life I remembered to return. But it never did. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the betrayal. Not even the affair. But the realization that sometimes, what's broken doesn't get put back together. No matter how much glue you pour into the cracks. A week after Emily promised it was over with Jake, I found out she was still talking to him. I don't remember exactly how I learned. Maybe it was something in her tone when she said she had to step out for a minute, or the way she flinched when I passed behind her while she was texting. Maybe it was just instinct. But one way or another, the truth found its way back to me. She wasn't done. Not with him. Not even close. That's when I reached out to Rachel. By then, she knew. About Jake. About the affair. About the lies Emily had woven around all of us like a net she assumed we'd never untangle. I didn't call her to start drama. I just needed clarity. Support. Someone who knew Emily well enough to speak to her in a way I couldn't anymore. We talked for a while, a long, winding conversation that was more sighs and silence than sentences. In the end, she agreed something needed to be said. Not by me. I'd tried. She'd tuned me out weeks ago. But maybe, just maybe, if it came from her friends, she'd listen. Rachel said she'd talked to some of the other servers at the restaurant. The ones Emily still laughed with during breaks. The ones who didn't know every detail, but had seen enough side glances and back hallway whispers to put it together. They'd talk to her. Not as a confrontation. As a kind of intervention. That was Rachel's word. An emotional reset. I didn't ask for specifics. I didn't want to know what they'd say or how they'd say it. I just said okay. That afternoon, I took the kids out, ice cream, a quick visit to the park. We stayed out later than usual. I made it feel like a treat, even though my stomach was a mess of nerves. On the drive home, I didn't speak much. Emily sat beside me scrolling through her phone, probably thinking I was just tired. Or worse, maybe she knew where we were headed. We turned onto Rachel's street. I slowed the car in front of her house. There were already several cars in the driveway. Emily's eyes scanned them quickly, and something clicked. I saw the exact second she realized. Her face hardened. What is this? I kept my voice calm. They want to talk to you. About what? You already know. She crossed her arms. I'm not going in there. You need to. I don't need a group of people telling me what to do with my life. No. But maybe you need people who aren't me to remind you what's at stake. She looked out the window again. I could see it, the panic behind her frustration. The guilt. The resistance. But she didn't move. You set me up. No. I gave you the chance to hear from people who actually care about you. Who see what this is doing to you, to us. It's not that simple. It never is. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, without another word, she opened the door and stepped out. She walked up the driveway like someone walking into a courtroom. And I sat there, watching her disappear into the house. She came home a few hours later. I was sitting in the kitchen, the kids already tucked into bed. I didn't ask what they said. I didn't ask how she felt. I just looked up when she walked in. Her face was unreadable. She stood by the door for a moment before finally whispering. I need time to think. I nodded. About what? About everything. Jake. A long silence. Then. You. Him. All of it. That night, we went to sleep in the same bed. No good night. No reaching out. Just two people lying inches apart, separated by a canyon that had been carved with 1,000 quiet betrayals. And even in the silence, I could hear the question she wouldn't say out loud. Who do I choose? The sad part? I already knew the answer. There's something strange about betrayal. Even after it's happened once, even after you've seen the worst of it, part of you still clings to hope. To denial. To the idea that maybe things can still be salvaged. That was me. Still holding on. Still agreeing to therapy. Still believing we could somehow claw our way back to normal. Emily said she was committed. Said she wanted to try again. That she was going to stop seeing Jake, for real this time. She promised this was it, a clean break, a reset, a final effort to save what we still had. I wanted to believe her. I think, at that point, I needed to. Even though my gut told me something wasn't right, I was tired, too tired to keep fighting the same battle over and over. So I let my guard down one last time. And a week later, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. Just a short message. She's still seeing him. That was it. No name. No context. But I didn't need more. I knew. I replied. Who is this? No answer. 5 minutes passed. Then another text came through. I work with her. I've seen them together. This isn't new. My heart was pounding. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, not because I doubted it, but because I didn't want to see the rest. But I kept messaging. And eventually, the pieces fell into place. The mystery texter confirmed what I had feared, and more. Emily and Jake had never stopped. In fact, their affair had been going on for over 6 months. Since long before she confessed. Since before therapy. Before the lies about Rachel's house. Before the coffee shop breakup. Before she stood in our kitchen and promised she wanted to rebuild with me. All of it had been a performance. And worst of all, they weren't just fooling around. They were talking about the future. Marriage. Children. A life. The messages didn't stop there. The texter, who eventually revealed themselves as Lena, one of the other servers at Sloan's, had been sitting on the information for weeks, watching it eat her up. She said she hadn't come forward before because she didn't want to destroy a family. But seeing Emily fake her way through work, therapy, and working on the marriage, while still sneaking off with Jake had pushed her over the edge. She wanted me to know the truth. And I finally had it. Then came the detail that cut the deepest. After Emily realized I'd used the location app to catch her. She got smarter. She'd leave her phone, intentionally, at places she knew I wouldn't question. Rachel's house. The restaurant. A grocery store parking lot. All the while, she was slipping off to Jake's. Making sure the map showed a clean trail while she built a life behind my back. She used my trust as camouflage. Used my exhaustion against me. That night, after the kids were asleep, I walked into our bedroom. She was already dozing, peaceful, unbothered, like someone without a care in the world. I stood there for a minute, watching her. Trying to remember the last time I'd looked at her and still seen the woman I married. But she was long gone. So I nudged her awake. She stirred. Eyes half open, voice groggy. What is it? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said. We're getting a divorce. She blinked. What? I want you out of the house. ASAP. We'll deal with the rest later. She didn't argue. Didn't ask why. Maybe because she already knew the answer. Maybe because she'd been waiting for me to finally say it. And just like that, it was over. The pretending. The hoping. The long night spent justifying someone else's deceit. I walked out of the room, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in months, breathed air that didn't feel stolen. Because now, finally, I was done. In the days and weeks after I told Emily I wanted a divorce, the house felt hollow. She didn't move out right away, not completely. But her presence had already faded long before her toothbrush disappeared from the bathroom. We started coordinating time with the kids like quiet business partners who used to be lovers. Every exchange was muted. Cold. No fights. Just frost. Somewhere in that in-between space, after the confrontation but before the paperwork, I kept texting Rachel. She and I had never been especially close before this. Emily had always been the bridge between us. Rachel was her best friend, not mine. The one who brought wine to our backyard barbecues, who kept tabs on who said what at work, who always made our kids laugh when the grown-up talk got boring. But when things unraveled, when the affair came to light and I started learning just how deep Emily's lies ran, Rachel became something else. A sounding board. A witness. A person who saw the damage from a different angle. At first, our messages were entirely practical. I'd text to ask, "Is Emily really working tonight?" She'd reply, "Yes." Double shift. "I'm at the restaurant too." Or she'd send me screenshots of Emily's schedule, unprompted, just so I wouldn't have to ask. Sometimes I'd ask how to bring something up with Emily in therapy, a way to phrase something that wouldn't send her spiraling or storming out. Rachel always answered with more grace than I expected. She never fed the fire. Never encouraged me to hate my wife, even though I could tell she was hurting too. Because here's the thing. Emily hadn't just lied to me. She'd lied to Rachel, too. Over and over again. Every time she said she was hanging out at Rachel's while really slipping off to Jake's. Every time she used her best friend's name as cover. Every time Rachel vouched for her without realizing she was being used as an alibi. It cut deep. And when we finally talked about it, really talked about it, it became clear that she felt betrayed too. By the time I downloaded a few dating apps, I wasn't ready to meet anyone. Hell, I could barely make eye contact with myself in the mirror without flinching. But part of me needed to show Emily I was moving on. That I wasn't just curled up waiting for her to change her mind. So I created profiles. Swiped a little. Talked to no one. Until one night, a night when the kids were with Emily, I was sitting on the couch half watching reruns, half scrolling through profiles, when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Still breathing." We chatted for a while. Nothing heavy. Nothing flirty. Just two people who'd been pulled into the same storm. And then I said it. Almost without thinking. "Wanna grab a drink sometime?" It wasn't a date. Not really. I told myself that. I just wanted to talk to someone who understood. Someone who'd been hurt by the same person. Someone who wouldn't look at me with pity, or suspicion, or judgment. And Rachel? She got it. When we met up, it was low-key. Just a quiet bar tucked behind a strip mall on a weeknight. She showed up in jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, hair in a messy bun, like she didn't want this to look like anything it wasn't. We talked for hours. About how Emily used both of us like props in her cover story. About how exhausting it was to keep giving grace to someone who kept throwing it away. About how you never really know someone, even when you think you do. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. There was no kiss at the end of the night. No grand gesture. Just a long hug, the kind that says, "Thank you for seeing me." And for once, that was enough. Several weeks after everything fell apart, Emily finally moved out. She found a small rental on the other side of town, something temporary, she said. Somewhere she could have the kids over on her nights, somewhere she could figure things out. I helped her move, not because I had to, but because it felt like the last thread that needed to be cut cleanly. No fights. No tears. Just silence and cardboard boxes. She left behind a few things, a jacket, some books, one of those decorative signs she used to hang in the kitchen that said, "This kitchen is seasoned with love." I threw it out the next day. The first few nights without her were strange. The house was too quiet, too still. I half expected to hear her brushing her teeth or closing dresser drawers in the other room. But the silence grew on me. It meant peace. It meant healing. It meant no more wondering who she was texting, no more pretending things were okay. For the first time in years, the walls didn't lie. Life since then has felt like two parallel stories. In one story, I'm a father, a real one. Present, focused, joyful in ways I didn't even realize I'd been missing. The kids and I do everything now. Hiking. Board games. Baking contests where I somehow always lose but still end up covered in flour. We went to a trampoline park last month and I pulled a hamstring trying to keep up. They loved it. I've made it my mission to fill every hour I have with them with something real. Not just being there, but showing up. Because when everything else crumbled, they were the only part of my life that didn't. And in the other story? There's Rachel. I won't lie and say it wasn't complicated at first. The blurred lines, the history, the guilt. But over time, that faded, not because we forced it, but because we didn't. We took our time. Got to know each other not as the people we were in Emily's life, but as who we were outside of it. And somewhere between all the late-night drinks and text check-ins and long walks through town just talking about everything and nothing, we became something. We've been together for 6 months now. It's easy. In a way I didn't think relationships could be. Rachel listens without fixing. Laughs without comparing. Loves without expecting me to earn it. She makes me want to be the kind of man I thought I was supposed to be for Emily, only now, I don't have to pretend. We go to farmers markets. Cook new recipes. Have game nights with the kids. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's real. And I'd forgotten what that felt like. In the background, I started taking care of myself too. Dropped 20 pounds. Started going to the gym 3 times a week, sometimes more. Signed up for a triathlon on a dare from my brother, and finished it, even though I thought I'd pass out halfway through the run. For the first time in years, I look in the mirror and don't flinch. Not because I'm healed or perfect or even over it. But because I know I'm trying. And trying, showing up, that counts for something. Sometimes the pain creeps back in. Usually late at night. Usually after the kids go to bed and the house feels a little too quiet again. But it passes. Because the life I have now, it's not built on secrets. Or alibis. Or someone else's choices. It's mine. And I'm finally living it. Emily moved out, and not long after, just weeks, really, I found out she was pregnant. Not mine, obviously. I didn't even need to ask. She got pregnant almost immediately after moving in with Jake. That alone would have been enough to make my stomach turn, but the rest of the fallout came fast and hard, like a tidal wave she didn't see coming. She quit her job. Not because she wanted to. Because she was about to be fired. The restaurant had received multiple complaints, whispers among the staff, quiet warnings from upper management, all pointing to one unavoidable fact. Emily had been Jake's direct supervisor. And that meant her entire relationship with him, from start to finish, could be categorized as a workplace violation, even harassment. Rather than face the paperwork, the investigation, the embarrassment, she handed in her resignation. Walked away with what little dignity she had left. It didn't end there. She tried landing a new job, some office gig she wasn't remotely qualified for. Somehow got hired anyway. Lasted 2 weeks. Gone before her first full paycheck. By then, she had already bought Jake a car. A used sedan, nothing flashy, but still, she bought him a car. I heard about it through the grapevine, mostly from Rachel, who still had loose connections at the restaurant and mutual friends with some of the staff. It was like watching someone set their life on fire with a smile. Then the rumors started. Jake was using. Not just recreationally, but regularly. And selling. Weed, coke, pills, whatever he could get his hands on. At first, I thought it was just bitter ex-employee gossip. But then he got fired. Not quietly. Not discreetly. He was caught high at work, nodding off in the walk-in cooler. One of the bartenders found him and had to physically escort him out. That sealed it. He wasn't just bad news. He was dangerous. And now he was going to be the father of my kid's half-sibling. Most of Emily's friends abandoned her. People who'd stood by her during her depression, who had helped her get back on her feet, who believed in her, all gone. They saw the affair for what it was. Saw how deeply she'd manipulated me. How she'd lied to Rachel's face again and again, using her as cover. The betrayal rippled outward, not just in our marriage, but in her friendships, her job, her reputation. She became a cautionary tale. And me? I stayed out of it. Watched the collapse from a distance. Didn't gloat. Didn't interfere. Just focused on the kids. Focused on us. There's no satisfaction in seeing someone ruin their life, not when your kids are still part of it. But there is relief. Relief that I'm no longer the one being dragged down with her. Relief that I don't have to live inside her chaos anymore. Relief that when I look in the mirror now, I see a man who fought to do the right thing, and came out the other side stronger. I don't feel sympathy for Emily anymore. I did once. I begged for her to choose us. I held her when she cried over breaking up with Jake. I supported her when she claimed she wanted to repair the damage. But now I see her clearly. And I pity the version of me who thought she was worth saving. These days, I'm focused on living. On Rachel. On the kids. On peace. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more dramatic tales.